We have lots of help and explanatory videos organized in the Climate Web, but it may not be totally clear how we're using the Climate Web to organize really huge amounts of information. What we're working towards with the Climate Web is the idea of actionable knowledge, which we're defining as getting the right information to the right person at the right time to help inform and influence their decision making. And that's why we're using the Brain software, which is a really powerful knowledge management software. And what we're going to do in this video is use one particular deep dive in the Climate Web, the social cost of carbon deep dive, to help illustrate what we're doing in the entire Climate Web, which includes about 75 different deep dives. The social cost of carbon happens to be a topic that is quite well developed in the Climate Web. We've been working on this issue for going on 20 years. And it also happens to be a topic that's going to be quite important in 2017. So let me go ahead and jump right into the deep dive itself to give you an idea of how we're organizing what is a huge amount of information. In the social cost of carbon deep dive alone, we have hundreds of sources, thousands of thoughts and links that are organized into this deep dive. And again, it's one of just 75 deep dives and hundreds of topics that are covered in the Climate Web. But to walk through a little bit, one of the key points is that we start with the idea of a filing cabinet. We've organized a huge amount of information. Several of these categories fit into the category of filing cabinet. In every deep dive, you can go in, you can hover over the thumbnail, get a quick sense of what the topic is about. And I'm not going to go into this here because I'm not really focusing on the social cost of carbon. I'm using it as an example. But you can do that with every deep dive. In every case, you can go over and remind yourself of how the deep dive is structured in terms of all of these different categories of information. And so you can do that, and you know, as usual, you can go and look at the home screen, the help screen, the search screen. All of these things are available to you. But zeroing back in on the deep dive itself, we have 4 categories of sort of filing cabinet information. We have sources, news stories, networks, and videos. So very quickly, in the case of social cost of carbon sources, here we basically have the social cost of carbon literature, a couple of 100+ documents. In many cases, I mean, you can take a look at sort of the cover sheet. Most of these documents are here as PDFs on your screen at the bottom. You can open up the PDF. In many cases, as you can see from the little green dot, we've extracted key ideas, key thoughts from a particular document, which we then organized in other ways, as you'll see. But in this case, one particular document, 2009 Ackerman, that's linked back to Frank Ackerman. You can go in and see all of the different materials that we have from Frank Ackerman. You can even follow that up to where he works and the various documents that we have from him. And you can also see this particular document is linked under the social cost of carbon and under integrated assessment models. But that just gives you an example of how each of these hundreds of different documents are organized and linked together. And in every case, you can get a quick sense of what the document is about. In addition to that, we have the social cost of carbon news. Again, hundreds of news stories relating to the social cost of carbon. Subcategories of news stories: social cost of carbon critiques, economic discounting, social cost of carbon in litigation. In every case, you can go in and look at specific news stories or sources. You can open up the hyperlink on your screen at the bottom to every one of these news sources, because all of it is available to you. In this case, you can see this is also linked back to mitigation economics and economic impacts in the news category, which is sort of this reddish category. Now, jumping over to the V, which is videos, here is a collection of social cost of carbon videos that we've pulled together from YouTube and from other sources. And if you click on these at the bottom of your screen, you'll actually see the video and you can click on it to play on it. Who knew there was social cost of carbon music out there? But you can access that here. The last sort of filing cabinet category, social cost of carbon networks. These are specific websites and sources that really are focused on the social cost of carbon. A subcategory, social cost of carbon individuals. These are mostly the authors that are doing a lot of writing about the social cost of carbon, which ties back in to the sources. And again, all of this is webbed together. So the social cost of carbon networks is a subcategory of the carbon economics, which is far more websites and sources, because the SCC networks is just one subcategory of that. So those are the four sort of filing cabinet aspects of the climate web. And it's very easy to think of the climate web as a filing cabinet for information, but it's really much more than that. So to give you a sense of that in the case of the SCC and the social cost of carbon, what are the frames through which you can look at the social cost of carbon? Carbon pricing through the social cost of carbon, the social cost of carbon at risk in a Trump administration, the social cost of carbon as cost-benefit analysis. In each of these cases, we've linked in certain arguments that are not our arguments. These are arguments that are being made in the literature around the social cost of carbon and this particular frame. So the frames are linked to arguments. You can also come back out and go into the arguments heading, and here you'll find all of the social cost of carbon arguments. And our idea here is to then pull in the best information, ideas, tables, figures, graphics for each of these arguments to buttress the argument. That is a work in progress, because it is a large amount of work, as you might imagine. And so it's not complete, even in the case of the social cost of carbon. But you can come in, you can sort of look at the topic through the frames, you can look at the topic through the arguments. But what we then also have here is Q&A for the social cost of carbon. So for example, arriving at social cost of carbon estimates actually opens up a whole series of other questions that are relevant to the topic of arriving at social cost of carbon estimates. If we look at, are there aspects of the SCC that we can't quantify, you'll see several thoughts here. Now, these are thoughts pulled from the specific sources that I pointed to earlier. And let me just open up another window here. As you can see at the bottom left, every one of these thoughts is reflected as being part of a particular source document. If I actually click on this thought, the harder to quantify thought, I can follow that right back up to this Jody Freeman paper, 2009, Climate Change and U.S. Interests. And the document is attached as a PDF if you want to look at it. And you can also see what are the key ideas, the key thoughts, the key tables, the key figures that we've pulled out of that particular document in order to help, for example, answer questions about the social cost of carbon. So we've organized hundreds of ideas and thoughts into answers for lots of different questions relating to the social cost of carbon. So again, this is a way of helping get at the idea of actionable knowledge, the right information to the right person at the right time, even though there's enormous amounts of information out there. Now, the social cost of carbon chess pieces, I'm not going to get into that in a lot of detail here because it's a larger topic that I'm covering in this video. But there are several social cost of carbon chess pieces that we see as being on the climate chess game board in 2017, and you can investigate those here. Last, the knowledge base social cost of carbon is basically where we take all of the different thoughts And again, you can see here in the bottom left that these thoughts are coming from a variety of different papers and reports, all of which you can get right back to by clicking on one of these thoughts and then simply following the thought up to that paper. It's all linked together in sort of a seamless way. But the idea of the knowledge base is to pull just a large amount of information together on a topic, allowing you to sort of just scan through it and see which of these ideas might actually be of particular interest to you. So the social cost of carbon knowledge base, signified here by K, is in some ways a dumping ground for information, but it's a lot of information about a particular topic that you might want to explore. Now, a totally different way of getting into the social cost of carbon issue and the climate web is through the index. And what you see over here linked to the left with the I colon, that's an index category. And let me get rid of what's down below here for now. So you'll see that the social cost of carbon index entry is also linked to the climate economics index entry. It's linked to the mitigation topics index entry. And there are a whole series of sub social cost of carbon index entries. Now, what's interesting about these is that each of these individual index entries is linked to resources, including news stories, reports, documents, other things specific to that sub aspect of the social cost of carbon. So in this case, the social cost of carbon and catastrophic change. Now, this is also linked to dangerous climate change. If you click on that, you'll find sort of opening up to you a whole series of resources on the larger topic of dangerous climate change, and subcategories of that include climate emergency, worst case, and it's linked to catastrophic change and to unknown unknowns. And so in every case, you can sort of click through these things to come up with new ideas about things that you might want to be taking a look at. And it's very easy to navigate through all of these index categories, of which there are more than 1,000 in the climate web. And you'll see linked here to the social cost of carbon index entry that what we have linked to here is not only the social cost of carbon deep dive, but the sea level rise deep dive, the climate impacts deep dive, the economics deep dive, all major resources within the climate web that might be of particular interest to you because you've clicked on the social cost of carbon deep dive. So hopefully that was an interesting look at how we've organized lots of information about the social cost of carbon into the climate web using the Brain software. Now, we like to say that if there's an answer for climate change out there, it's probably in the climate web. And we say that because this social cost of carbon example is just one of more than 75 deep dives that we have in the climate web, where we've organized not just hundreds of sources, but tens of thousands of sources covering all the different possible topics that you might want to look at in terms of climate change. And one of the beauties of this structure and this software is that it's all customizable. So we can take this structure and turn it into something that is appropriate for a beginner audience on a topic or a very advanced audience on a topic. So you can explore the climate web to find and to look for and find actionable knowledge for yourself, or we're happy to help you do that. There are a whole series of ways we can use the climate web to your benefit and your organization's benefit as tour guides in effect, and we would love to explore those with you. The climate web may seem intimidating. There's lots of information in there, and it may come across as squiggly until you're used to the interface, but it really does only take a few minutes to learn, and we'd encourage you to do that. Again, we have lots of help videos if you go to the main entry point into the Climate Web. And we'd love to get your feedback and questions on how we can make this most effective for you and your actionable knowledge needs. Thanks.